No one expected something like this to happen in the studio today. The journalist was sure that she would crush Melania Trump with sharp questions. But at one point the situation changed dramatically. The former First Lady's reaction shocked everyone. What happened in front of millions of viewers will be remembered for a long time. You have to see it. The bright studio lights cast a golden glow over the sleek, modern set of Real Talk Tonight. The audience was buzzing, their whispers blending into an anticipatory hum. This was no ordinary episode. Tonight, they had an exclusive guest, one that the media had been trying to get for years. The former First Lady, Melania Trump, was about to sit down for a high-profile interview, and the world was watching. At the center of the stage, across a polished black table, sat Olivia Carter, the razor-sharp journalist known for her unfiltered and often controversial interviews. She adjusted the microphone, clipped to her dress, her confident smirk unwavering. Olivia had built her reputation on tough questions and even tougher guests. She had made CEOs, celebrities, and politicians sweat under pressure, and tonight she intended to do the same. The audience held its breath as a producer signaled the start of the show. The camera zoomed in on Olivia as she turned to face the lens, her voice smooth and professional. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Real Talk Tonight. We have an extraordinary guest with us today, a woman who has remained an enigma despite being one of the most recognizable figures in the world. Former First Lady Melania Trump joins us for an exclusive conversation about power, privacy, and the weight of silence. The applause swelled, and the camera panned to the entrance of the stage. With effortless grace, Melania Trump stepped forward. Dressed in an impeccably tailored white suit, she exuded quiet confidence. Her long brown hair framed her face, and her piercing blue eyes scanned the audience before she took her seat. Unlike many guests who fidgeted under the bright lights, she remained poised, her expression unreadable. The moment she settled into her chair, Olivia wasted no time. Mrs. Trump, thank you for being here. Let's get straight to the question everyone wants to ask. Why now? You've spent years avoiding interviews, declining countless requests. What made you finally say yes? Melania's lips curled into the slightest smile, as if amused by the question. She tilted her head slightly, her tone calm but deliberate. Because the silence speaks when it needs to, she said simply. A ripple of murmurs moved through the audience. Olivia leaned forward, clearly expecting more. So you're saying that silence is a strategy? Melania met her gaze, unwavering. Everything in life is a strategy. The difference is knowing when to speak and when to let others speak for you. Olivia exhaled through her nose, sensing that this would not be an easy interview. She had planned to dissect Melania's years in the White House, her role, her apparent distance from political affairs. But it was clear that Melania was not here to be dissected. There are those who say your silence over the years has been a form of complicity, Olivia pressed. By not speaking out on major political issues, weren't you effectively supporting everything that happened? For the first time, Melania's expression shifted slightly, a glimmer of something, amusement, flashing across her face. Tell me, Miss Carter, is speaking always a sign of power? The journalist opened her mouth to respond but hesitated. It was a rhetorical trap, and Olivia knew it. Melania continued, her voice smooth as silk. Sometimes the loudest voices say the least. Words are like currency. Use too many, and they lose their value. The tension in the room was palpable. The audience members leaned forward, captivated by the exchange. Olivia, ever the professional, did not let herself be rattled. She flipped through her notes, searching for a new angle. Let's talk about your time in the White House, she pivoted. Many first ladies before you took on social causes, leading public campaigns. Michelle Obama, for example, spearheaded initiatives on health and education. Your Be Best campaign had a focus on online bullying, but critics argued it lacked depth and impact. What do you say to those critics? Melania folded her hands in her lap, unbothered. I say that those who criticize from a distance rarely understand the full picture. Impact is not measured by headlines. It is measured by the people who benefit, not the people who comment. Olivia nodded, her eyes narrowing slightly. So you believe your campaign was successful? Melania took a breath, her posture as impeccable as ever. Success is not measured in applause. It is measured in change, and change is slow. The journalist tapped her pen against the table, contemplating her next move. Many have questioned your relationship with former President Trump. The world saw a woman who often kept her distance in public, who seemed detached from the political machine. Were you unhappy in your role? A small smile played on Melania's lips. What people saw was what they wanted to see. Perception is a mirror, distorted by whoever looks into it. Olivia pressed on, determined to break past Melania's enigmatic responses. Did you support your husband's policies? Melania tilted her head slightly. Support is not the same as agreement. A partnership is not about sharing the same thoughts, but about understanding the person behind them. The tension between the two women crackled like static. The audience could feel it. This was a battle of presence, of control. Olivia was pushing, but Melania was immovable. The journalist exhaled, leaning back slightly. So if you could do it all over again, become First Lady, enter the political world, would you? Melania studied her for a moment before answering. I do not entertain hypotheticals. Life is lived forward, not in circles. The audience erupted in murmurs. Olivia, ever the professional, offered a tight smile. Fair enough, Mrs. Trump. But before we end this segment, let me ask you one final question. Do you believe you were misunderstood? Melania Trump gave her first true, genuine smile of the night. Only by those who never listen. The camera zoomed in on her composed expression, capturing the moment in high definition. The screen faded to black, leaving the audience with a lingering sense of intrigue, of power, and of a woman who had mastered the art of saying everything, without saying too much at all. The studio remained tense as the interview resumed after a brief commercial break. The audience, now more engaged than ever, was eager to see if Olivia Carter could finally crack the seemingly impenetrable composure of Melania Trump. The lights dimmed slightly as the cameras zoomed back in on the two women seated across from each other. The game of wits was far from over. Olivia cleared her throat and leaned forward, signaling that she was about to take a different approach. If she couldn't break Melania's silence, perhaps she could maneuver her into revealing more than she intended. Mrs. Trump, Olivia began smoothly. Throughout your time in the White House, there were moments when the press speculated about your feelings, your stance, and your role. Yet, you rarely responded. Tonight, I'd like to offer you the opportunity to clarify something for the world. Were you truly as indifferent as people believed? Melania tilted her head slightly, as if considering the question. She took a deliberate pause before answering, ensuring every word was chosen carefully. Indifference and discretion are not the same, she said. People assumed silence meant apathy, but silence can be a form of wisdom. Olivia raised an eyebrow, sensing an opening. So you're saying your silence was intentional? A choice rather than a necessity? Melania offered a slight nod. Every word spoken in a position of power carries weight. I chose to weigh mine carefully. The journalist tapped her fingers against her notes, her mind racing through possible ways to press further. She decided to shift the conversation. Let's talk about the moments when you did speak, Olivia continued. The times when the world did hear from you were often measured, precise. But what about the moments when you were silent when people expected you to speak? For example, there were moments during your husband's presidency when major events unfolded, and many felt you should have addressed them directly. Melania took a slow breath before responding. I spoke when it mattered most. But I was not elected. I was not the one making the policies. My role was different. And yet, Olivia countered, as the First Lady, you had a platform that could have amplified voices, influenced policy discussions, even contradicted narratives that some found controversial. Did you ever feel constrained in your role? For the first time, Melania's gaze sharpened slightly. I understood my role. Influence does not require noise. Those who listened carefully always understood where I stood. The audience murmured. It was a subtle but powerful statement. Olivia, sensing the moment, decided to up the stakes. Let's talk about something more personal, Olivia said, adjusting in her chair. Your marriage has been the subject of endless speculation. The distance, the gestures, the moments captured by the media. Many interpreted them as signs of strain. Would you like to set the record straight? Melania's expression remained unchanged, but the pause that followed was slightly longer than the others. Then, with the same measured grace, she responded, "A marriage is lived, not performed. People see what they want to see." The journalist smirked slightly. "So you're saying the media got it wrong?" "I am saying the media tell stories. That is their job. It is not always my job to correct them." The tension in the room heightened. Olivia knew she was walking a fine line, but she wasn't finished yet. "Then let me ask you this," she pressed. "If there was one thing the world misunderstood about you, what would it be?" Melania's expression softened just slightly. "That I was not watching. That I was not listening." Olivia leaned back, absorbing the response. "And were you?" "Always." The air in the room felt electric. The journalist realized she had pushed as far as she could go without losing control of the interview. It was clear that Melania would not break under pressure, nor would she be manipulated into revealing more than she wished. "Mrs. Trump," Olivia said finally, "you are, without a doubt, one of the most enigmatic figures of modern politics. Thank you for sharing your perspective tonight." Melania gave a polite nod. "Thank you." As the camera zoomed out, capturing the entire studio, Olivia Carter knew that this interview would be dissected, analyzed, and debated for weeks to come. Melania Trump had once again controlled the narrative, not by playing the game, but by refusing to engage in it the way others expected. And with that, the segment ended, leaving behind a lingering question in the minds of millions. Had Olivia won the interview, or had Melania outmaneuvered her without even trying? The air in the studio remained thick with tension as the interview pressed forward into its third segment. The previous exchanges had left the audience captivated, unsure whether Olivia Carter, the sharp-witted journalist, was leading the conversation or if Melania Trump was subtly maneuvering her way through every question with unwavering poise. Olivia adjusted in her chair, sensing that time was running out to get the moment she was after, the one that would go viral, the headline that would dominate every media outlet the next morning. She had pushed Melania on politics, on silence, on marriage. Now it was time to go deeper. "Mrs. Trump," Olivia began, her voice measured, "many have said that you lived in the shadows of one of the most powerful men in the world, that your identity was defined by his presidency. Do you believe that?" Melania took a slow breath, her expression unreadable. "A shadow only exists where there is light." A murmur rippled through the audience. Olivia arched an eyebrow. "So you're saying you never felt overshadowed?" Melania's lips curled slightly, but whether it was amusement or something else, Olivia couldn't tell. "I am saying that people often assume a role without understanding it. My role was never to stand in front of him. It was to stand beside him. That is what a partnership is." Olivia nodded, clearly expecting this answer, but she wasn't done yet. "Yet, in moments where you could have distanced yourself, where you could have taken a public stance, you didn't. Why?" Melania tilted her head slightly, her blue eyes locked onto Olivia's. "Why must people believe that disagreement requires a stage?" A sharp exhale came from somewhere in the audience, a sign that Melania's words had struck a chord. Olivia, however, was undeterred. "Because sometimes silence can be interpreted as agreement," Olivia pressed. "And in a political climate as divisive as the one we live through, silence was deafening." Melania did not hesitate. Silence is only deafening to those who do not understand it. The audience was dead silent. Even Olivia, who had built a career on pressing guests until they stumbled, seemed momentarily at a loss. The journalist quickly recovered. "Then let's talk about something the world has never heard from you before. If you could say one thing to the people who misunderstood you, what would it be?" Melania sat still, contemplating. Then, with quiet certainty, she answered, "You were never meant to understand me. You were meant to watch me. And you did." The room erupted. It wasn't a loud, raucous cheer, but a wave of murmurs, gasps, and astonished expressions. Even Olivia seemed momentarily disarmed. The journalist leaned back, exhaling as she glanced at her notes. The game had changed. She had come in expecting a battle, but it was clear now that Melania had been playing an entirely different game. One that required no shouting, no sensationalism, only precision. Mrs. Trump, Olivia finally said, her voice softer now, you've certainly given us a lot to think about. Melania gave the smallest of nods. That was always my intention. And with that, the interview faded to its final commercial break, leaving the audience, the viewers at home, and even Olivia Carter herself wondering if they had just witnessed a masterclass in control or the quietest form of defiance they had ever seen. The energy in the studio shifted as the show entered its fourth segment. The interview had taken unexpected turns, with Melania Trump's measured responses and deliberate silences creating an atmosphere unlike any Olivia Carter had encountered before. The audience, initially expecting a standard political grilling, now found themselves caught in a subtle power struggle, one where every pause, every gaze, and every carefully chosen word carried weight. Olivia adjusted her earpiece as she received a cue from the producer. She had one final chance to push Melania into revealing something deeper, something raw. She decided to take a different route, one that would force emotion into the conversation. Mrs. Trump, Olivia began, her voice softer now. We've spoken about your time in the White House, your marriage, your silence, and the perception the world has of you. But I want to ask you something personal. What is something the world never saw? Melania's expression remained unreadable, but the way she folded her hands in her lap suggested she was giving the question real thought. A few seconds passed before she finally spoke. They never saw the cost, she said, her voice steady. The cost? Olivia echoed, leaning in. What do you mean? Melania exhaled lightly, her gaze unwavering. The cost of privacy. The cost of every assumption made about me. The cost of standing still while the world pulls you in every direction. The audience was silent. For the first time in the interview, there was a flicker of something beneath Melania's composed exterior, not vulnerability, but something close to it. Olivia saw her opening. Did you ever feel like you lost yourself? She asked carefully. Melania took another pause, then shook her head. No, but they wanted me to. And when they realized I wouldn't, they created a version of me that suited their story. A murmur rippled through the audience. Olivia tapped her pen against her notes, processing the response. She could push harder, she knew it, but something told her that Melania had given her all she was going to give. So you believe the world only saw what it wanted to see? Olivia pressed, giving her one last chance to expand. Melania nodded, a small smile playing at the corner of her lips. That is true for everyone. The difference is I never needed them to see anything else. The weight of the moment settled in the studio. Olivia knew this would be the takeaway, the soundbite that would dominate headlines. The former First Lady, unshaken, unmoved, had just made it clear. Her silence had never been submission. It had been control. The interview was coming to an end, and Olivia knew she had only one question left, one that would define everything. Mrs. Trump, she said, if you could leave the world with one final message about who you are, what would it be? Melania looked directly into the camera, her posture still poised, her expression calm. And then, with absolute certainty, she answered, I was never what they said I was, and I never had to be. The audience erupted in whispers, some applauding, others still stunned by the simplicity and finality of her words. Olivia sat back, exhaling as she realized she had just witnessed something rare, an interview that would be discussed for years, not because of what was said, but because of what remained unsaid. As the screen faded to black, the world was left with one undeniable truth. Melania Trump had not just survived the scrutiny, she had mastered it. As the interview reached its final segment, the tension in the studio had transformed into something else, an almost reverent stillness. The audience, which had come expecting a combative exchange, had instead witnessed a masterclass in quiet control. Melania Trump had not just answered questions. She had dictated the terms of the conversation itself. Olivia Carter, ever the seasoned journalist, knew she had to end this on a high note. She had probed, pressed, and maneuvered every angle possible, but Melania had given only what she had chosen to reveal. And yet, there was something magnetic about the way she held the room. Olivia decided to take one last shot at getting something deeper. Mrs. Trump, Olivia said, her voice carrying the weight of everything that had transpired in the past hour. When history looks back at your time in the White House, what do you hope it will say about you? Melania took a slow breath, allowing the question to settle before she responded. History is not written in a moment. It is shaped by time, by perspective, and history always changes, depending on who tells it. Olivia leaned forward slightly. And how would you tell it? Melania's lips curled into the faintest of smiles. I do not need to. Others will, and they will see what they choose to see. A few murmurs rippled through the audience, recognizing the elegance of her response. She was not rewriting her story. She was allowing history to write itself, free from her interference. It was a strategy that had defined her from the very beginning. Olivia nodded, knowing she was close to the end. So you have no regrets? No moments where you wish you had spoken more? Defended yourself more? For the first time, Melania tilted her head slightly, considering. Regret is for those who believe they could have changed something. I lived the life I was given, and I lived it as I chose. The audience held its breath. There was the defining statement of the interview, a declaration that Melania Trump had never been anyone's victim, nor had she ever sought to be understood on anyone's terms but her own. Olivia exhaled, her journalistic instincts telling her that this was as much as she was going to get. Mrs. Trump, thank you for your time. Melania gave a small nod. Thank you. The applause started slow, almost hesitant, before swelling into something more significant. The camera zoomed out, capturing the two women as equals, one trying to uncover, the other refusing to be defined. As the screen faded to black, the world was left with one undeniable truth. Melania Trump had not been conquered by the media's need for explanations. She had once again proven that sometimes the most powerful voice is the one that knows when to remain silent.